But today we're going to talk all about how we maintain momentum in our spiritual growth. How do we relapse proof our lives? Well, I wish, like I'm sure you do, I wish that my spiritual life followed a predictable pattern. I'm going to have to try to use, did it? Oh, it completely went away. There we go. Uh, Hopefully you can see that. I can't really see. This is what I expect my spiritual growth to look like. But far too often, this is what my spiritual growth ends up looking like. Not at all a predictable pattern. And yet, we're called to grow, and growth is a choice. And while growth doesn't have a predictable pattern, as I just tried to show you, I can tell you that the opposite of growth does. Again, whether we call it backsliding or relapse or whatever, I can tell you that it always holds a predictable pattern. And the first thing that we see is complacency. And I like to envision it, if you can just picture it. Sorry for showing all of these uh, on a separate item, but I like to look at these in concentric circles. The first one is complacency. Complacency starts when we get comfortable with our short-term gains. We confessed our big problem after all. We started dealing with it. We've made some progress. We've maybe even mended a relationship or two, but our pain has been reduced, not eliminated, just reduced. And then we rationalize that it's livable. So we stop praying about it. We stop working on it. We stop, um, we stop making it a choice. We don't feel as desperate about it as we did at first, and so we don't feel like we need to work on these healing choices anymore. We've got this. And then boom, we're complacent. So what happens after complacency? Well, the second rung, or the second circle, is confusion. See, in our complacency, we get confused. We begin to play those games with ourselves. Maybe we start to rethink that first choice. Remember what the first choice was? Realize I'm not God. We say, well, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I can handle this on my own. Well, that sounds like playing God. We forget that it was our best thinking that got us to where we were. Did you hear that? It's our very best thinking. It's the smartest that we can be got us to where we were. And so then we get confused about how exactly we got out of it. It was only through the work of the Holy Spirit in our lives. It was only through admitting that we are powerless, that we are spiritually bankrupt. And so we start to get confused, saying, well, maybe I do bring something to the table. Phase 3, then, that third circle, is compromise. Compromise means we go back to the place of temptation. We return to the risky situation that led to our downfall in the first place. Maybe we say, well, I'm going to go to the bar, but I'm just going to watch the game. Or maybe we say, oh, well, I really need to go to the mall. And that's where shopping addiction happens. Or you can say, well, my friends are all going to the buffet as an overeater. Or maybe you say, well, I can go to that internet site. It's akin to somebody that got a certain magazine that now is defunct, but it was in print for about 50 years and heard all the time. It was a men's magazine, and people would often say, oh, I just get it for the articles. Yeah, baloney. That's compromise. It's just like Winnie the Pooh when he was looking at the honey pot and he said, I wasn't going to eat it. I was just going to taste it. See, when we place ourselves in risky situations, we will make poor choices. Maybe not the first time, but eventually, every time. And that brings us to phase 4. Phase 4 is catastrophe. That's when we actually find ourselves back in that old hurt, that old hang-up, that old habit. The hate comes back, the resentment returns, the behaviors become second nature again. But I want you to understand something. Catastrophe is not relapse. The relapse started back in phase 1, complacency. Catastrophe is just the end result. Hear that again. When you hit catastrophe, that's not your relapse. Your relapse is when you get complacent, when you stop doing the things that got you there in the first time, in the first part. Galatians 3:3 tells us that Paul says, how can you be so foolish? You began with God's Spirit. Do you now want to finish under your own power? See, we fall back into this predictable pattern of relapse when we know which way to go, we know what choices to make, we know the right thing to do, but we choose not to.